Hey, football fans, score big this fall with our senior night gifts from loveyoursenior.com. These treasures are just what you need to make your memories last a lifetime. But hurry, these limited edition pieces are as fleeting as those Friday night lights. Visit loveyoursenior.com now and grab yours before the final whistle blows. That's loveyoursenior.com.
At the end of the day, I see it as like information versus an actual unique experience with your brand. Some people might literally just want information, but someone that wants to learn and experience and connect and feel a deeper transformation is going to want to connect with your community and your brand at a whole, which is why, of course, video is one of the best ways to do that.
Well, hello, and welcome to season 2 of the Simple and Smart SEO show,
the podcast for solopreneurs, service providers, and e-commerce sellers who want to learn the basics of SEO in all the places it shows up.
I'm Crystal Waddell. I help Shopify store owners go from feeling like an SEO zero to your very own SEO hero in just one day using AI, UX, and other tech ninja moves.
And I'm Brittany Herzberg, SEO and case study copywriter, helping service pros increase sales without being on 24/7, using the power of SEO, story, and social proof.
Join us. We're just a couple of business besties who love learning and sharing what we've learned,
as we show you how simple
and smart
SEO can be. So what are we waiting for? Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Simple and Smart SEO show. We are so happy to have you here. We are here with Natasha Pierre. Hopefully I said that. I never check names before, and I like with Herzberg, I'm always like, I should check that. So Crystal, Natasha, say hi, ladies.
Hello. Excited to be here.
Good morning.
I'm excited. We're going to be diving into all things video, SEO, Instagram, podcasting. We're going to weave all of these things together. So to get us kicked off, Natasha, you want to tell us a little bit about, in case people don't know who you are and how you help people in the world?
Yes, definitely. So I'm Natasha of Shine with Natasha. I'm a video marketing coach for entrepreneurs and creators. And really my goal is to help people simplify how they're approaching video while focusing on original video content. So not trending content, not hacks, but really a strategy that's sustainable for them and can help them see results wherever they're showing up. That's what I do as my main part of my business. I was a former social media manager, so I interweave that with how I teach and coach my clients. And then I'm also a creator myself for my podcast, the Shine Online Podcast, and other types of brand collabs and partnerships.
I love it. I love that you focus also on organic marketing because especially with video strategy, video content, it is organic. It's us. It's showing up in our natural states and having conversations with people and sparking ideas. And I just think it's so wonderful. And Crystal and I we both have downloaded things of yours, consumed your content. So this is just really exciting to be able to have you here and ask you questions.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive right in.
Yeah.
I love that you said that you're not focused on trends, because I think that the trends and shiny object syndrome, I've been a victim. It's so real, but I always try to tell people what you have, an algorithm won't take that away. An algorithm change is not going to change who you are at your core in terms of your business. And so I think so many times we hear the word trends. I think that's just such a great takeaway that like, hey, don't focus your efforts there. Focus it on the core of who you are.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with my favorite question, which is, how do you define SEO, or what do you think of when you hear the term SEO or search engine optimization?
Yeah. So in my video world, I think of people being able to search for a topic, a keyword, and being able to find video content that aligns for that. I feel like we've seen that more and more. Like back in the day on Instagram and social media, it was like hashtags, right? But now there's just smarter and smarter algorithms on platforms like TikTok and even YouTube, which is highly searchable. And now even more on Instagram, where you can search something. Like the other day, I was looking for a recipe and I had salmon. So I literally searched salmon and I was able to find recipes for that. And so I feel like we often poo on the algorithm, but it really does take SEO and helps our content be more discoverable, which I know as a consumer, I really enjoy, but especially as a business owner is definitely bonus points there. So that's definitely my perspective and take on it.
Yeah. And I think that's so brilliant because I've even had people even recently find me on Instagram simply because of what I have in my header, and the content, like you said, that I'm putting out actually gives them some way to connect with me and gives them some way to see what I talk about and how I talk about it, and to just connect a little bit quicker, because whether it's video or audio, I find that those things, those two mediums rather, really allow you to just bond with someone or to butt heads with them pretty quickly. So you either figure out who you're just totally aligned with their train of thought, with the way they teach things, with what they're teaching about, with beliefs that they're sharing or values that they have, or even just the topics that they're talking about. Or you're like, this is not my people. And then you just go away and find your people. So I think that it's really wonderful just to have the different ways to be able to connect with people, and video is such a good one. But some people are pretty intimidated by video. And being an introvert, being that kid, really up until I would say 2-3 years ago, I was very intimidated by video or any kind of public speaking. So let's dive in with this one. Do you have any thoughts that come to mind when someone is either new to video, they consider themselves introverted, or just like shy?
Yes, definitely. I think the biggest thing is really validating all those feelings, because I have coached hundreds of business owners across so many different types of industries and niches. And 20% of the work we do is strategy. The other 80% is mindset and how we feel when we're showing up in our confidence. And things can go really deep, right? Our experiences in society from our childhood, even from corporate, for so many people that then went to entrepreneurship, all of those things can impact how we think we need to look and sound and act in our video content. And really, there's so many different insecurities that can come up. And what I really encourage people to do is go a little deep there on really, why are you feeling uncomfortable with showing up and being in your video content? Is it a life experience? Is it a thought you have about yourself? Is it a thought that you've been told? I know a really big one for people that were in corporate is that you have to be really professional to be taken seriously. And so people think I need to sound, look, be all done up, all those types of things in their videos for their business, when it's really not the case. So really finding the source of where that's coming from, and start showing up even when it feels messy. Because every single video you create, you're going to get better at it. You're going to get more comfortable at it. It's the really annoying tip, but it absolutely works. And even when I started on video, I wasn't comfortable talking. I wasn't comfortable being my full self. I didn't know how to edit. I never went to how to edit a Instagram video school. But the more and more videos I've created, probably thousands at this point, I slowly but surely was getting better and getting more confident. So start with what feels the easiest. You don't need to do a lot of fancy edits. You don't need to have a really fancy space. You don't need to use all the types of video, right? Maybe it's stories that feels accessible. I know some people really like lives because they don't need to edit them and they can be conversational, or they really like short form content. Really think about what is the type of content that you really get excited about and feels like the easiest way to start creating more videos. And then you can add and evolve from there.
Just this morning, I was posting a reel on Instagram, and I had done a screen share that was like me swiping up for this summit that I'm a part of. And I was like, how do I speed this thing up? Could not think, can I get a technical piece of advice here? Is there a piece of software that you recommend to speed up video, that you want it to tell the story, but if it's just so long?
Are you tired of outdated SEO methods that just don't cut it anymore? Want to establish your company as an authority in your niche fast? This is Crystal Waddell, and I'd like to introduce my content audit service. This is where I analyze your content, identify areas for improvement, and turbocharge your online visibility in just a few steps. Say goodbye to mediocre rankings and hello to the top of the search results. Visit crystalwaddell.com/content to take advantage of this special offer. Level up your SEO game with my content audit service and dominate your niche today. Time is ticking. Go to crystalwaddell.com/content. Crystal Waddell is not responsible for any sudden increase in website traffic or envy from competitors. Results may vary.
Yeah, definitely. So tactically, you could definitely use an app for that, like a video editing app like InShot. You can speed up or slow down the footage that you have. But in terms of speeding up the process, because I feel like that's like a part of video content creation, is the prep makes all the difference for me. What I find is that we sometimes are just in between our days and we're like, I just want to create something, and we go and create it. And the intention behind that is great. But the stuff I like to do before I film and edit and put together a piece of content is I actually like to sit with the idea and I like to outline it. And I'm not scripting anything, but I'm outlining what are the main points that I want to convey with this piece of content, and what is the best way to visually show the information that I'm talking about. For that example, Crystal, for sharing that you're part of a summit lineup, something that you could do with that same screen share is you could leverage the green screen effect, which is right in Instagram. So you can literally find the AR filter. You could make a green screen where you're talking above it. Hey, do you want to hear from speakers like this, including myself? This is what I'm going to be talking about. This is what the event is. Because that kind of problem solves of it's not necessarily that the screen share that you recorded was too long, but it just needed to be put together in a different way where you're using every second really valuably. And something that, well, this is a random tip, but I think highly relevant to what we're talking about, is when it comes to editing, people think that shorter videos are better, or I need to do a lot of editing for a piece of content to do well. But my philosophy is that if every second is doing its job and it's really making an impact on grabbing their attention, giving context or value of what you're talking about, and then like wrapping things up with a next step or a call for engagement or a call for action, that is a great piece of content. And that can be 10 seconds or it can be a minute long. So hopefully that kind of answered your questions in a few weaves and wiggles.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm going to totally go back and use it again and upgrade it.
Love it.
Yeah, thank you for that. One other question I had just to follow up with the different types of platforms. Like my favorite SEO platforms are obviously my website, then YouTube, and then Pinterest. So I was just curious, like if you were to navigate like using your video in the best way to help your SEO and findability, like B says, do you have any tips for like off social, but more like website, YouTube?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about the repurposing game. That's personally the philosophy that I go by. So for something like YouTube, I'm putting all my TikTok and my shorts there, but I'm also creative like native content as well. For my podcast, I try to make it stretch as much as possible, including it on my website, also including it as a YouTube video. Something that I've been doing is actually like setting up my camera with my podcasting mic and recording a video just like I would any other YouTube video. So you're getting two pieces of content in one, but it really can live on its own and it looks just as great as a podcast. So I'm able to get podcast traffic. I'm able to get website traffic. I'm able to grow my YouTube channel. Everything goes together. So it's really about thoughtful repurposing, not necessarily just like copying and pasting every piece of content you're creating, but really taking one piece of content and thinking of how you can leverage those more searchable platforms.
That is so good. And you're hitting a certain nail on the head for me, because one of the things that I've like mentally talked myself into and out of like a dozen different times has been what Crystal has actually done is create her own YouTube channel. And I'm like, I want to do this. I don't know. I want to do this. I don't know. You've definitely hit on some different tips for just video in general and even repurposing and not just resharing the same content. But do you have any specific like YouTube advice for someone who keeps doing that mental dance of do it, don't do it?
Yes, such a great question. I'll just give my strategy because I feel like you could argue I'm still figuring the YouTube thing out. I have a small channel, like a little over 1,000 people. And that's been for like a few years, really, but so slow and steady growth compared to my other platforms, of course. But I've gotten clients from it. I've gotten people to come over to my Instagram, to my email list. So it's definitely doing its job in terms of what it's supposed to do. But the biggest thing that's been really helpful for me is not putting the pressure on myself to post weekly, which is the ideal cadence for a platform like YouTube. But because it is so highly searchable, videos that I posted 2 years ago are getting even more views than they were the month that I published them. So really thinking of YouTube as a lot more of a long game, and every piece of content you're adding, even if you're not able to go all in and do weekly or multiple times a week, that you're slowly but surely able to grow your catalog there. And thinking of things like, if you do have a podcast, how can you possibly create YouTube content from it? Or if you have a blog or you write a lot of like really long emails, how can you turn that into YouTube content? So thinking of the lowest hanging fruits and starting there, and I think the thing that scares people the most about YouTube is that it is very different in terms of the thumbnails really matter, the titles really matter, which is a little bit different than other platforms, but also that it's just long form. And so people think they need to have the perfect setup. I have a little like vlog camera. It's not very fancy. I don't mess with the settings. I press it on and it records. So I have a very simple setup. I don't use any fancy lights. And in terms of editing, you can either use a software that makes it really easy to edit. I know softwares like Descript or Veed.io. Those are really great options. Or my personal preference is hiring help. When you're at the point where you're adding on multiple platforms, it can be really helpful to have an editor or someone that's an expert at that SEO on a platform like YouTube to really help you take your YouTube growth to the next level.
Yeah, I like that you shared that. And you also reminded me, because you brought up the emails again, I wanted to comment, like you were talking about, should we do short versus long videos? And you hear people say, oh, I should keep them short. But like you said, as long as every second is doing its job, it can be whatever length it needs to be. I say that with case studies. I say that with sales pages. I say that with a variety of things. So even just the other day, I wrote a pretty like lengthy email, and I told my boyfriend the word count, and he was like, oh my gosh, that's so long, because he's got his own business. I normally keep them around this many words. And I was like, yeah, but here was the purpose. Here was the strategy. Like, I'll see what happens, but everything was doing its job. So I think that was a really good point to make. And I just wanted to make sure that landed for people, and in the variety of formats as well. But that's really helpful. So thanks for sharing that, because I definitely call myself a recovering perfectionist for certain purposes, because it's actually true. So hearing all of that and keeping the pressure off, I really appreciate hearing that.
Yeah, definitely. And to just touch on perfectionism, something that's been really helpful for me and also my clients is realizing that perfectionism doesn't actually help us get results with our video content, right? We think it's helping us get a better result or whatever it is, but in reality, it's probably preventing us from actually using video, or preventing us from posting the draft or the video that we just need to create. And so really realizing that imperfect video content is actually what gets us results is very freeing, because it takes the pressure off. If I'm going to do this, it has to be at 100%. It gives us that room to grow and evolve with our strategies.
So true.
On YouTube, they have that new podcast function. Have you utilized that? And if you have, can you tell us just a little bit about how you've done that?
Yeah, definitely. So for some context, essentially what YouTube has done is they want to push and promote podcasts. When you're creating a video that is tied to a podcast, you can add it to its own podcast tab and playlist for your show. I have used it and leveraged it. And I think in general, it's a great way to like better organize my podcast content versus like my native organic YouTube content. I know they promised that it was going to be a really great way to get new discovery and reach for your podcast. I don't know if I've ever necessarily seen that, but it might not be as much catered towards baby channels like my own. But yeah, I've leveraged it. And I think especially if you have one channel for your business or your brand, which is my personal approach, if I have a Shine with Natasha channel where I have regular content, I have my shorts, and I have my podcast all under one umbrella versus just a podcast channel, I find that it really helps organize that experience if people are binging or wanting to follow along for that, and sharing it as well. It's easier to share that podcast playlist section versus like your entire channel or just one video to keep people binging.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's funny. If you've got a baby YouTube channel, then I must have a zygote or something. We have 27 subscribers who I love, and I'm validating them. And my YouTube channel is called Knowledge Vomit. So if anybody out there, if you're a YouTube person, you like YouTube, come follow me. Let's build my channel. But I've done what you've talked about. Like, I do so many things. I just started recording myself doing those things. And I've also have a lot of video from the previous years of me exploring different things. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put it on YouTube. And so I love the idea of using YouTube as a portfolio and organizing the portfolio. I think that's a really interesting take on it. So that kind of leads me to my last question based on some of the stuff you guys were discussing. And you had mentioned we have all this content and the content does what it's supposed to do. And I thought to myself, you know what? Could we just say or define what content is supposed to do? Because we're creating so much content for so many platforms. What is content supposed to do ultimately? Like, how are we making money, or how are we going to eventually make money from all this content that we're producing?
Yeah, that's such a great point to highlight. And I feel like I'm often more broad when I mention it because depending on the business and depending on the platform, I think the goal can be totally different, which I think is really exciting, like the possibilities that we have with our video content. I think for most businesses that have an offer, they have a service, they have a product, chances are they want conversions, right? They want someone to see their content, be a part of their community, and to actually get a sale that was influenced by that content. Notice I say influence because I actually noticed that email is my top converting piece of content, but that is because everyone from my email list came from a piece of video content that I created. So I think it's important to understand that entire conversion or sales journey for your specific offers and your audience, because people often think someone didn't make a sale from my video. But for me personally, I actually want you to go to my webinar or my free challenges, or I want you to go somewhere that's going to prime you for that next step, which is to invest in my offer. But if you're selling like a template or you're selling like a physical product, you probably do want people to make that direct sale. So it might look a little bit different. Another thing that I feel like now that the creator and business owner worlds are starting to mesh and intertwine, which I've experienced myself, is that sometimes we want our content to build a community, to position ourselves as experts or authorities or really great at what we do so we can attract brand collaborations or even attract things like speaking engagements or partnerships or collaborations. That's another thing that I'm doing with my content. And now, since we're speaking of YouTube, I was actually talking with an event coordinator that I ended up securing for an awesome speaking engagement I'm going to next year. And she was saying that one of the first places she went to learn more about me as a speaker was actually she Googled my name and found my YouTube channel. And I thought that was so powerful to show that every piece of content you're creating, if you're wanting to do more speaking, if you're wanting to maybe test out working with brands, that probably that first step to getting there is almost always your video content. Even for the Shine Online podcast, we were accepted into the HubSpot podcast network in their creators program. And they were literally saying, I watched all your video content, and it was for a podcast accelerator. So I think, yes, like sales and conversions is what I'm looking for when it comes to the coaching part of my businesses. But also there's so many other goals that our video content can help us reach, depending on what we're focusing on and depending on which platform is going to help us get there.
That's such an awesome point. You like already talked about it, but could we go a little bit deeper on how you see video supporting our SEO strategy?
Yes, definitely. I think the first thing is like on the actual social media platforms themselves. So people being able to on TikTok, which we've seen literally blow up over the last few years, now on Instagram, even on Pinterest with video, YouTube, they're able to go to a platform and yes, maybe get recommended content, but they're able to search for exactly what they're looking for and get content recommended, which ideally is going to be your content, right? So that's what happens on platform. The other element is being able to take something like a podcast that maybe turns into a YouTube video, and can you turn that into a searchable blog post or into a free resource that you're going to embed on your website? So I think it can also go into the places that like we own. But in my world, it really starts on those social media platforms, being able to discover that new content.
Hi, friends. Are you just starting a business doing what you love? Maybe it's a coaching or a consulting business, or maybe you have a product business or a service business. Whatever it is, I'm so excited for you. Congratulations. So many never have the courage to do this, but you're actually doing it. I want you to know right now that building your business into a successful business will be one of the greatest accomplishments of your entire life. And I speak from personal experience on that because for the past 24 years, I've been running my own businesses from my home. And now I share everything with you behind the scenes, tips and strategies on the She's Just Getting Started podcast. Oh, yes, you need to tune in. I drop episodes every week. She's Just Getting Started podcast because I know you're just getting started too.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because a lot of times, at least I feel this question a ton where people are like, does SEO apply like off my website too? Yes. SEO is like in everything that you're touching. We have talked about it on this podcast. We've talked about it on a podcast. So audio, we've talked about it on videos. We have transcripts, we have blogs, we have Instagram channels. We have all of these places. And what I think of, at least when it comes to SEO, people have heard me share this, is you are sharing things so that you show up as the answer to a Google question. You can also be showing up to a question that is posed on a podcast platform, on a social channel. Like, it is just being really intentional and thoughtful about the stuff that you're sharing because you want to be seen as an authority, because you want to help the people who are looking for these resources, these trainings, these fill in the blank. So thank you for bringing up SEO on social platforms because I don't think people hear that enough.
Okay, so another thing that you talked about just a little bit ago was building community. And I think with the rise of AI in search results and Google's SGE, so what is that, search generative experience? But essentially, when you Google something now, there's like a possibility that you could have a summarized result come up at the top of the search results. And that's what they call SGE. And so a lot of SEOs and a lot of people are concerned that this is going to take away from the actual clicks to websites. And it's been a conversation, I think, for a long time for people who deal in SEO and advertising. Okay, what are ways that we can actually get people into our ecosystem and be able to communicate with them directly? And obviously, email list is one thing, but community building has been in the conversation now for at least a couple of years by early adopters who saw this coming down the pipe, and especially people who built their communities on social media and saw access either diminish or decline or insert whatever word you want to. So I'm assuming that you're one of those people that's like on the forefront of this. So what suggestions would you have to business owners, even us as podcasters, to build our community? Because I think that community it's the one thing that we can stand between us and the algorithm changes.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like the biggest shift I'm seeing is like with things like AI and people being able to discover content in new ways or even create content with this AI generated information, right? So that's like a whole other sector. Is really, at the end of the day, I see it as like information versus an actual unique experience with your brand. Some people might literally just want information, but someone that wants to learn and experience and connect and feel a deeper transformation is going to want to connect with your community and your brand at a whole, which is why, of course, video is one of the best ways to do that. I'm just thinking off the top of my head because it was an idea that I had for content today, so we can use this as an example. Piece of content I wanted to create was one of the best tips for editing your video content is actually focusing on your video footage first, so not actually editing. And so that was a piece of content I had. And so if you went to search what like best tips for editing short form video content, are you going to get that tip? Probably not. But me actually showing my process on how I edit better content by actually focusing on my footage first. Maybe I'm having visual examples and I'm walking through different steps and I'm like sharing my process on it. That shows how that piece of content for me is always going to be more valuable for the right people that want more than just information. Because eventually, which we're already at in a certain extent, things are going to be so saturated with noise and information that people are going to be craving the latter, which can only come from like a real live human being that is telling us or showing us or sharing with us in our video content. So to bring that back to community building, people want to connect with you, whether you're a bigger brand, whether you have a physical product, whatever it is, people want to connect with that person. What are your unique thoughts, your unique philosophies, your unique approach, what you're interested in outside of what you do in your business? I think people don't realize how much people getting to know you and connect with you actually influences their decision to take that next step. So that's really where I would have people focus. And I have a 3-part follower journey concept that I think might be helpful. I can share it now or share it a little bit later. That kind of might tie things together. Keep going. Okay, I'm getting thumbs up. Keep going. This is something that I start with in my strategy lesson on my program because it is so important for understanding what we actually want audience members, users on social media to do to build a community. So for this 3-part follower journey, the first part of this journey is discovery. And more importantly, how is someone finding your content from SEO, ideally, right? Relevant to the show. How are people discovering your content and how are they actually making the decision to follow you and stick around and be a part of your community? Because what I see so often is people are trying to get viral views and get their content in front of more eyeballs. But are they actually deciding to stick around? Which is where, I know, Brittany, you were talking about this earlier in the episode, which is where when someone finds you and they go to your profile, are they going to be able to get to know you, your brand, what you're going to be sharing more about? Can they see pieces of content that'll get to know you, right? That is a really important first step which is where your first impression with your profile makes the biggest difference in having bingeable content. And after that stage, when people actually decide, okay, I'm deciding to follow you and I didn't go get lost somewhere else and completely lose your Instagram account for the rest of the time, then it's really about that nurture stage. That's where that person is becoming more than just a follower and an audience member, and they're actually becoming a part of your community, where they're starting to understand who you are. They're starting to feel like they're knowing you and they're connected with you and they trust you for the information that they want on a topic that you're an expert at. So they're engaging with your content. They're looking for your next podcast episode or your next email, and they're really a part of that entire brand experience. And they're not just a follower that's going to scroll past your piece of content. They're going to notice your brand and really want to be a part of it. And then, of course, the last phase is what we've already touched on, which is conversion, or what I like to call a super fan, right? Someone's been in your community for an extended period of time where they're just piping hot, super, super warm, and they're ready for that next step. So we want to make sure with our content, we make it very easy and streamlined for them to know what that next step is and making it very easy for them. So I feel like that kind of brings the community building, but also the conversion point home for all of us of, yes, we're getting new eyeballs to the piece of content we're creating, but how are we actually keeping them for the rest of the phases of that follower journey?
Thank you for walking us through that. I love having processes. It makes everything so much simpler and gives us a place to start. I also want to say that I'm over here like really giddy on the inside because case studies, of course, I have to give a plug for case studies, tie all of those things together. I have seen my clients, first of all, it ties SEO, storytelling, and social proof together, which are just a magical marketing combination. And then I've seen a lot of my clients include their video interviews with these people on the case study page, which, yes, exists on their website. But then they can also take this and talk about repurposing content and bringing this full circle. They can take that part of the story or the full story or an element of the story and share it on social. They can turn it into a video. They could turn it into a reel, whether or not they're even showing their face. They could turn it into a podcast episode or a podcast mini series. I just want to, if you want to like super speed something like this, like what Natasha is sharing, a case study is a perfect way to do that because it drops someone in your world. It gives them all of these things to touch and feel and look and smell. It gives them, they're showing up because you're answering a question that they had that which you likely typed in on Google or something like that. But then you're giving them all the other elements to build that no trust faster. So I just wanted to take a moment to share that. But thank you for sharing your process.
Yeah, I have to second that. And anytime that I can hear someone ask good questions, I'm like, okay, I can apply this to myself as well. And I think anybody who's listening that's an amazing takeaway. When someone that is an expert at something asks themselves certain questions, those are questions that you can take for your business as well and apply to you. So I want to say thank you for that. You talked about the information seekers versus somebody else. I can't remember what you said. It was the two types of people who are going to come to your profile, which I think is super, super interesting. And so what I thought of too was just like reflecting on my own experiences in the online business world, interacting with people who have gone before us and who are considered experts in the online community. So for instance, replying to that first email, thinking that they're talking to me, not just talking to 10,000 people, and then having that revelation that, oh crap, I just replied to somebody who has no clue that I'm even on their email list. But I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't want people to feel like that. And so what stood out to me was you were saying like how to make them a part of what you're doing versus just a client avatar that you're studying in order to be able to sell them more stuff. I know the difference between feeling like a part of somebody's community versus feeling like, oh, how can I manipulate your information to get more sales? And so that's what I'm really interested in. Do you have any thoughts on that or any tips to really make people feel a part of it versus just a moving piece in the economic puzzle that is our online business?
Yeah, such a great question. A few things that came to mind for me is really keeping my content conversational and not in a I want to get engagement for the sake of engagement type of way. Of like generally like thinking of my content as less of a megaphone that I'm speaking at people with, but more of a two-way conversation and encouraging that type of conversation and that type of like community rule. This is how we hang out in our community. We're actually talking back and forth. There isn't like a picket fence. I know sometimes newer followers, like when I reply or engage with their content, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm fangirling. And I'm like, you'll slowly realize there's nothing to fangirl about. Like, this is how we roll. You know what I mean? So I think really showing that things are conversational is a really big one. I think the other thing is connection of sharing more than who you are as a business owner. When I talk about content pillars for my own clients, I like to focus on 5 because I find that 2 or 3 are going to be what you're an expert at, what you're selling, what your offer is related to, right? But I'd like to have one that at least is like your personal pillar to like evolve and change with of what are you interested in? What are you excited about? Who are you beyond just what you do? Because that's what's going to help you stand out from someone when they're looking at the other options. I know I was actually in a launch and this client ended up being like one of my favorite just dreamboat clients. She was so great. And I was in a launch and she replied to one of my emails, a sales email about my program. And she had a list of questions like, hey, I just have a few questions about the program. And the last question was, what is your favorite brand of matcha? And I thought that was such an interesting question because if anyone's a part of my community, they know I share my matcha like every day. There's matcha running through my veins. Like it's very much a part of my brand by intention and not an artificial way. Yes, I genuinely love matcha and I have matcha every day, but I think of it as a very intentional connection point of entrepreneurs love caffeine. So chances are they're having their morning beverage as well. So this is a point of connection for me with my audience. And I'm not talking about something completely out of left field that isn't actually related to my brand and what I'm trying to do. So I think that connection piece is a really important piece just because it's on the top of my head. And I always think product brands really struggle with this. I want to give another example of Ali Bonaire, who's the founder of Oat House. It's like a granola butter spread. So delicious. Would highly recommend. And I love how she approaches her content because she shares like behind the scenes of running a product business in the warehouse and like shipping orders. But also she talks about wellness and her food journey and eating disorder recovery and all those different types of things. And it's not random because it's very related to what she does, but it's not oat butter all the time, like granola butter all the time in her content. And so I really think that building those connection threads is really important and something not enough people really consider in their content. And I think the last thing is just like being ethical and empathetic when you're creating sales content of is this actually urgent? And if it is, like we're being ethical with how we're talking about urgency also just like leading with empathy. I feel like I've been seeing so much very like spicy, disruptive content lately. And I'm all for standing out, like sharing your opinions, not everyone regurgitating the same information, but also doing it in a way that is not harmful to others, of making people feel guilty or triggered or hurt by anything. So I think that's another very important element that people need to consider when creating content. So that was probably a little bit of a longer answer than you were hoping for on like how to actually build that community.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you talked about building connections, but not just ethical ideas here, which I truly appreciate, but empathy, because empathy is something that B and I have talked about for years. And I feel like there is just this nearly invisible push towards empathy as a superpower in marketing. And again, I'm shocked because I'm like, that's just how I view life. Like, how is it so hard to think about somebody else when you're doing what you do? But
Yeah.
the other side of it is I've never had a business where I was only in business to make the most money that I could possibly make. You know what I mean? Like business for me has always had some sort of root in an emotional motivator, whether it was to help my husband and my family as I resigned from teaching. We needed money to make money to eat. And so that was a driver, obviously. I make photo collages for athletes. I love celebrating people and their accomplishments and that type of stuff. So there was like that emotional driver as well. And I wanted them to derive some joy. And not everybody has that root with their product or service where the offering itself is driven by the emotional outcomes of the buyer. But I'm so glad to hear you talking about this because empathy is so very important. I think that a lot of people who are not in business in a year or 2 years, if they miss this, this is going to be a primary reason of why.
Mic drop. We're all just, yep.
So good.
Spicy take or whatever.
It's good. And just to riff on that for a minute longer, there's been one through line with all of the businesses that I've had. Started with massage therapy. Now I do marketing and I will go back to massage therapy, but I just don't have my license in Connecticut yet. So one thing that's been the through line is making sure that someone else is taken care of, having that desire to want to help people, wanting to give them an incredible scene, the inner workings of my brain, which are sometimes scary, but I think through all these details in all I can think of is detail, but I think of them in very small granular pieces where this is going to add up to this and this is going to stack up to that. And they're going to touch this first. They're going to see that next. They're going to hear this thing. So it just doesn't even sometimes register in my brain that other people don't think like that. And it's nice to have the reminder, and it's nice to not just have empathy mattering, but also that other people's brains don't naturally work like that.
And you mentioned that you started as a social media manager, but I'm just curious, like, where do you feel like your breakthroughs came as a business owner to where you realized that you could have this connection? Because you are so approachable. Tasha has a really great business and a large online presence, but she comes into the room as your peer. And I truly appreciate that. Where did you build that muscle? Or is there anything that framed this experience for you?
Yeah, I think when I actually made the shift from social media manager to then like fully embracing my personal brand and going more into coaching and the creator and speaking side of my business, it was actually the year my business in 2020 had the biggest amount of growth, which I know a lot of businesses experienced. And what was really interesting when I looked at where I literally got viral growth over a short period of time, when people ask me how, I'm like, I was really building a community when I had a few thousand people. And I treat that the same now as I did then. And so all that to say, I think that has always been just how I operated when I'm creating for other people versus creating for views or creating for virality or creating for a fat bank account has always maybe felt a little bit more resonant to me. So I don't know if there was necessarily like a shift or anything that happened overnight, but I think naturally focusing on building relationships with my community, with other people using social media, I saw that was like, then the bonus was oh, wow, people were like really advocating for me and sharing for me during this really big time. And that was how I was able to see really big growth, or that was how I was able to connect with really awesome brands and speaking engagements. So it naturally led to the result that I think so many people are looking for. So it's just become just like a part of how I operate. I don't know. It's a great question.
I like that answer because it's just even, this is why I love audio and video. Like you can hear it. It's not something that you planned. It's not something that you had a strategy around. It's just like Crystal and I, this is how I show up. This is how I do things. I don't really have a great answer for that. It's just how I am. So that's really cool to hear.
It's really encouraging. It's in a world where it's like sell, sell, sell. It's really encouraging to hear that, look, you can sell and grow in success and still be like a nice person and come from a place of, I want to help you get better versus I'm just trying to get something from you. So that I really appreciate hearing you say that today.
Yeah, thank you. And I honestly, the more I was thinking about it, I feel like I don't think it's something that an exclusive group of people have. I think everyone listening to this episode probably has it, and maybe you're already doing it in a certain way, or maybe they've gotten distracted by all the shiny things that we all get distracted by. We see all the formulas and the quick roads to success, and we see all these really big shiny things. And so I think it's really easy to feel like you have to operate in that way to get that result. Wow, maybe that is the result I want. When in fact, you can do it how instinctually you want to do, which I think is is like my biggest goal for my clients, right? Is I don't want them looking to me like, how do I create videos like Natasha? I want them to be able to have the confidence to build it themselves. And so I think in a lot of ways, like if that's the one takeaway you get from this episode with your video content is you already have everything you need to show up on video and to be in your content. It's just trusting that and knowing that it might feel a little tough at first. It might be a little like you might be having those growth pains, but knowing that you'll eventually see the fruits of that, I think is really encouraging.
That is really encouraging. I was going to ask you for the last stuff, but like that just reminds me when I was getting started on Instagram with sharing videos and really tapping into stories, I still had my massage practice and a lot of my followers were my massage clients. And I had one woman in particular and I love her to death, but she came in and she was like, so I saw your video and like, you just didn't look like you. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, you weren't smiling. I'm known for smiling. I'm known for laughing. And I was like, man, okay. So from then on for a while, I was just imagining that I was recording a message to her. I'm like, how would I show up when I was speaking with this person and what would I do? And the funny thing was like, not only did she notice, I started getting messages from other people. And it wasn't about how I looked. It wasn't about where I was sitting. It wasn't about anything. It wasn't about how crazy my hair looked that day. It didn't matter. They were saying things about what I was saying. This really helped me. This really clarified this. So for me, that was a thing that I looked for then and still look for now. And if you're listening to this, maybe you can also just notice when people are coming to you and what positive things they are saying about what you're sharing, because I know that they're there. And just to hold on to that, make a happy folder, do something to hang on to that. Thank you for everything that you shared. And before we let you go, I know that you have a few different things places people can connect with you, where they can hear your podcast. And then I think you have a little gift for listeners.
Yes, definitely. So you can hang out with me over on Instagram at Shine with Natasha. I'm also on YouTube and all of the other places. And then you can listen to the Shine Online podcast wherever you're listening to this podcast. Specifically, I would recommend starting with my Back to Basics series. It's a 4-part series and it talks about a few things that we've already mentioned here today, like having your videos convert, content pillars, how to get organized, all that fun, nerdy stuff. So I definitely recommend start your binge there. And then I know you guys have both mentioned that you've downloaded my free things, which I think is really cool. And I have a free challenge that will help you create low lift video content that's really impactful. So I highly recommend checking that out at videoconfidencechallenge.com and getting started with your video journey there.
Yay. Thank you so much for everything that you shared today.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.
If you like this info, subscribe before you go so you never miss out on something related to SEO.
See you next time.